It's August 1999, 6 years into the Clinton presidency. Lloyd Bentsen is in the marbled and majestic East Room of the White House. He's at an important presentation. Hillary Clinton, the First Lady, welcomes in the crowd.
Please be seated and welcome to the White House.
The First Lady introduces the president, who beams like a proud parent. He has the privilege to lead a presentation of the nation's highest civilian honor. Only a handful of individuals are recognized each year.
A Texas farmhand by the age of 6, a bomber pilot by 21, a congressman by 27, an immensely successful businessman by 35. Lloyd Bentsen saw and did more in his youth than most see and do in an entire lifetime.
President Bill Clinton invited back his first Treasury Secretary, Senator Lloyd Bentsen, in order to present Bentsen with this exceptional honor.
Lloyd Bentsen answered my call to take on perhaps the toughest challenge of his public life, to become Secretary of the Treasury at a time of grave economic difficulty for our nation. He accepted that challenge with characteristic gusto. He became one of the strongest voices in America and in our administration for fiscal discipline and expanded international trade. He became an acknowledged world leader in financial and economic affairs. We passed the economic plan that paved the way for what is now the longest peacetime expansion in our history. For a lifetime of exceptional service to his country, I am proud to bestow the Medal of Freedom on Lloyd Bentsen. Colonel, read the citation.
The speech that Clinton gave, and it was beautiful.
Lloyd Bentsen's son, Lan, was there.
He knew where he was and why he was, and he understood the Medal of Freedom. It was an extraordinary experience.
Secretary Bentsen returned to the White House wheelchair-bound, but still in good spirits. He suffered a stroke and a series of seizures not long after he stepped away from public office in 1994. This ceremony was about celebrating an extraordinary life, a successful businessman, U.S. Senator, Finance Committee Chair, and Treasury Secretary. Someone whose commitment to the public good made a positive impact on everyone from young children all the way to retirees. He received Clinton's admiration and recognition, but only now, as we take in the full effects of his public life, do we understand just how extraordinary an impact that work has left, and what Lloyd Bentsen taught us about tackling America's toughest, most intractable issues. This is the Bentsen Blueprint. Lloyd Bentsen and 50 years of public life. Much of it told in his own words. Lloyd Bentsen retired as Treasury Secretary in December of 1994. After decades in public life, Bentsen and wife B.A. finally moved out of D.C. and home to Houston, Texas. Going back to Texas together meant finally having time for his personal pursuits, but it also meant more quality time with B.A., his never-ending support through his entire career.
That's B.A. Bentsen. B.A., where are you? There she is. That BA stands for Bentsen's Best Asset. She's obviously that.
She was a woman so refined and elegant that even the famously foul-mouthed Lyndon B. Johnson didn't dare swear in front of her. Married after 6 dates, B.A. was a dedicated spouse since Bentsen's bomber pilot days in World War II, his most trusted confidant. B.A. Bentsen would later get a bit into politics herself as a Democratic National Committee woman at the riotous 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. She spent countless hours on the trail supporting her husband during every one of his campaigns crisscrossing Texas.
You know, my wife and I, she travels with me most of the time.
So that was a very strong marriage.
This is Ed Knight, Bentsen's general counsel at Treasury.
So on one plane ride, we were in a small plane. It was just the two of them and a couple of Secret Service agents and me. And it was one of these Lears where, there's this back bench and they're sitting on either side. And as what their habit was, whenever the plane would take off, they weren't very demonstrative. They would hold hands, and they were holding hands across my lap. And it was like, okay.
Joe O'Neill, Bentsen's Senate Chief of Staff.
BA was clearly, he had a nickname for her that went back many, many years, which was BA stood for Bentsen's best asset. She was the best trooper that ever went on a campaign trip.
BA raised 3 children, her 2 sons Lloyd and Lan, and Tina. Moving 22 times at her last count while juggling her and Bentsen's busy schedules. She also founded 2 church schools, served on boards of the Houston Symphony, the Houston Museum of Fine Arts, and the YMCA. She was active with cultural organizations and philanthropic efforts. Houston attorney Andrea White is a longtime friend of the Bentsens. She paid tribute to BA as part of a public service award.
She campaigned just energetically all day long for Lloyd. His projects were hers in the sense that, she believed in them too, and she did it for him, but she did it for the cause.
Here's her son, Lan Bentsen.
She was what I would call a force multiplier.
And she remained until her death a tireless champion of her husband, known for her grace, charm, and commitment to family.
My mother was one extraordinary woman. She was probably the only woman ever to shoot a lion between the eyes, left-handed with a purse hanging off of her arm. She was a great shot. She was a great sports person. She was a great athlete. She was tall and beautiful and vivacious and remembered everybody's names, and everybody was comfortable around her, but he could not have had a better partner.
B.A. also took the lead in Bentsen's care following his stroke in 1998. That was followed by a debilitating seizure, which left him immobilized and virtually speechless.
The tragic thing about that was he didn't get to see or understand what all he had accomplished, because the things that they put in place before 1994 were all manifested over those next 7 years. And that's when you had 26 million new jobs and a stock market that tripled. All of those things happened. He didn't get to see that.
This is coverage from the First Presbyterian Church of Houston.
In May of 2006, the long line of dignitaries piling into the church made it look like a State of the Union speech. But the dozens of senators, congressmen, cabinet secretaries, and other elected officials were in one place in order to pay their respects.
And you can see mourners filing in. Our live coverage now on C-SPAN.
Former Treasury Secretary and Senator Lloyd Bentsen died in the spring of 2006 at home in Houston, with his family by his side. He was 85.
Usually we have a friend of the family come and speak, and today we are honored to have as that friend President William Jefferson Clinton.
Clinton walks to the lectern wearing a black suit and blue tie.
Lloyd Bentsen lived a rich, full life with discipline, energy, grace, and joy. He touched the lives of millions of others here in his beloved Texas, across our country, and eventually all around the world. Even though he had a manner that was somewhat patrician and cool, his merit was so evident and his way of dealing with people so direct that he inspired admiration and respect, and as far as I know, absolutely no resentment.
The former president and Bentsen's former boss turned to Bentsen's legacy and his economic beliefs.
He had a massive positive impact on people here at home and all around the world, passing a plan that reduced the deficit by more than twice as much as we estimated and gave us the longest peacetime expansion in history, setting the stage for an unprecedented level of cooperation with our neighbors to the south during the 1990s, and giving us a chance to build a whole different future for the former communist world.
Clinton, as his friend, thanked him for so much, including for not hiding the heart and spirit of who he was.
Not long after I took office, we had a cabinet retreat at Camp David, and we were all supposed to bond.
He said that in air quotes.
And a friend of Vice President Gore had been recruited to help us bond. So after we did all the serious stuff and talked about our dreams for the country and who was going to do what and how, and we imparted all the sort of, intellectual, rational stuff we could, this facilitator thought one night we would bond better if we would all tell something about ourselves, preferably about our childhood, that no one else knew. So I thought, I'll play along with this. I'm the president, I'll go first. I talked about how fat I was as a kid and totally insecure. I got about 2 minutes into my shtick and Lloyd got up and went to bed. And I learned that if there was anything about his childhood the rest of us didn't know, it was intentional. His life was highly intentional.
And highly influential, private and self-contained. But the fruits of his labor showed up in his family, his staffers, and his public service. His blueprint for public service and policymaking is the reason this podcast exists, because history isn't a straight line. The problems of today are not so different from the problems of yesterday.
The CBO said that the U.S. budget deficit will rise to almost $2 trillion in 2024.
Payments on the national debt, that's what the government has to pay to borrow. It looks like that is going to be higher than defense spending this year for the first time.
The economic policies of the Chinese Communist Party present a clear and present danger to the American worker.
Deficits, trade, inflation, health care, family care, retirement, and the list goes on. When Lloyd Bentsen was first elected to the House in the late 1940s, the overseas hotspots were Taiwan, the former Soviet Union, Korea, and a spirited debate raged over funding other countries' wars. In the 1970s, when he led the Senate Finance Committee, the biggest issue was inflation.
Talked about curbing inflation and therefore having to raise interest rates.
Wages weren't keeping up with prices, for housing and health care in particular. And on the trade front, Bentsen fought tariffs with the creation of trade alliances like NAFTA and the expansion of GATT. His trade expertise is one of the most lasting aspects of his legacy.
I chose trade because I could see what was coming after having traveled around the world. And I could see the changing numbers, but I thought those were going to compound and accelerate. And so I wanted to be in a committee where I thought I could have an impact on that, make a difference.
In present day, the current administration has launched a trade war, officially announcing new tariffs on imports from the U.S.'s top trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Tariffs increase the price of imported goods into America with hopes that this move buoys American products and companies. Bentsen warned that protectionism comes with consequences. Other countries can retaliate, making it hard for American products and companies to sell overseas, making everything more expensive. And when businesses struggle, that can mean higher unemployment and potentially political instability. History shows that raising tariffs backfires, notably following the Great Depression era passage of the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. It can collapse the economy.
I think if you revert to protectionism, you're on the way downhill. You've given up. You're not going to expand your markets. You're not going to be a world power. That's the beginning of the end. I think that's utter foolishness. But I think by the same token, you should not accept the protectionism of other countries. You ought to try to break those barriers down.
The Bentsen Blueprint advocates for fair trade alliances, healthy competition among countries, and of course, there's our federal debt now in excess of $36 trillion. Some economists say that just Paying the interest on the federal deficit could also destabilize the economy. The Bentsen Blueprint is then as relevant today as it was when he was alive. Lloyd Bentsen.
You come at it from the two sides. One is you're working to build the economy for everybody while taking care of the elderly and the very young. And then the economic model would be strong savings, low interest, fair trade, and no deficits.
Today, addressing the deficit the Bentsen way would mean caring about the deficit in the first place and tackling it with spending cuts and strategic tax increases, just like the 1991 and 1993 Deficit Reduction Acts that Bentsen was instrumental in passing. Today, we're hurtling in the opposite direction. Reducing taxes without cutting spending is a straight addition to our federal debt. And this year, the 2017 tax reform expires. The expiration would mean higher taxes for American citizens, but would create a deficit reduction. Or will lawmakers increase debt by extending those tax cuts without a commensurate cut in spending? Warnings from Bentsen 30 years ago sound eerily prescient. This is his 1991 interview with David Brinkley on ABC.
Are you worried about a bidding war developing between the two parties to cut taxes excessively?
Well, I must say, I do get concerned about that, and I don't want to see that one happen. I know the president very much wants to do a middle-income tax cut. That's not going to be easy, because in turn it must be paid for. And the Republicans must remember that one, too.
Bentsen reminds his interviewers what happened when the Reagan administration came in cutting taxes without funding those cuts.
You know, what we saw at that time, a bidding war insofar as the cutting of taxes, and then we saw the escalation of debt, quadrupling it.
Today, the Republican Party has completely dropped reducing debt and deficits from its platform. True story. This real concern for the American economy and the lives and livelihoods of its people makes the Bentsen Blueprint all the more vital to revisit. Lloyd Bentsen set out to do something for the young, the old, and the economy. And a good economy stands on 5 legs: savings, a balanced budget, low interest rates, fair taxes, and fair trade. Here's his son, Lan.
I want him to be remembered for what he did for the economy and for the elderly and for the very young, and those things which he accomplished in public service. I wish people would be aware that it's nice to excel in some areas, but if you can make a contribution across a range of areas, whether it's in military service or in business or in public service, that's a bigger, better life. And to me, he was just an extraordinary model. If you could just do half of what he did, a quarter of what he did career-wise. We definitely need more people like him willing to serve.
Here's Michael Levy, Bentsen's chief of staff.
He passed some hugely significant health care bills, including catastrophic health insurance.
He also used tax bills to address poverty, a lifelong concern for Bentsen.
Probably the single biggest poverty reduction program after Social Security in the history of the United States. The creation and then the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Millions of people have secure and portable retirement funds today thanks to ERISA, the landmark pensions bill that Bentsen stewarded to become law. He was on the right side of history more than he wasn't, in so many ways ahead of his time. Supporting civil rights with the abolishment of poll taxes, and desegregating his business before it was widely acceptable, challenging the filibuster, and pushing for improvements in health insurance. He also hired, mentored, and nurtured a generation of staff and colleagues. People like his Senate Chief of Staff, Joe O'Neill.
He clearly had the reputation during the years that I was with him as probably the best run Senate office. He expected that kind of behavior from his staff, and his staff was fiercely loyal.
They have gone on to do great things, becoming today's leaders and influential policymakers. Senators Bentsen's acolytes have become lawmakers, cabinet secretaries, Secretary of the Army, served on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. led Dallas as mayor, or represented the U.S. at the European Union. In business, they've risen to head major organizations, becoming the global chairman of Hill & Knowlton or the vice chairman of NASDAQ.
And they're all in significant positions doing significant things because that's their nature. But they're doing it in not-for-profits, they're doing it in consulting, and they're doing it in human services. It's a very nice range of engagement. It's a pretty well-accomplished alumni association.
They learned from Bentsen's example to leave the state, the nation, the world better than when they found it. Jack Martin.
Has he to be remembered? Oh, I think as a patriot and as the ultimate public servant, because that's really what he was. He was in it for that reason and that reason only.
But he never sought the glory. Ed Knight.
If you look at his portrait in the Treasury Department, he just said, on my portrait, just say he made a difference, okay? He didn't want to pound his chest. And if he's still alive today, I don't think he'd write a book.
And as Michael Levy recalls, his temperament and his faith in finding compromise ultimately led to getting so much done.
Little things didn't rattle him a great deal. And he took his job as a legislator to try to find the vital center of American politics, Texas politics and American politics, how to deal with, the better angels of our character, but simultaneously to move it at a pace where he could find the middle. And there were enough moderate Democrats and even some liberal Republicans at the time that it was easier to find the center in the body than it is today. And so he was the master, truly the master of finding the vital center and then putting the nonsense away and working out deals.
Whether at the negotiating table or on the tennis court, Senator Bentsen was a no-nonsense leader who never sought the limelight. To the contrary, he spread the credit to get broader support, preferably bipartisan. He did his homework, and he had the answers to the thorny questions because he took the time to learn them.
I'm the kind of a fellow that'd rather go out and play sandlot baseball than to go watch a World Series. I'm going to be involved.
He became one of the strongest voices in America for fiscal discipline and expanded international trade. His son, Lloyd Bentsen III.
We need a Lloyd Bentsen. I had a friend of mine email me yesterday, a couple of days ago, from Washington. And out of the blue, he said, boy, looking at these deficits, we need your dad, Lloyd.
His leadership in 1993 led to the economic plan that paved the way for the longest peacetime expansion in American history. Undergirding it all was the Bentsen philosophy.
To ensure that our children would live better than we did and have more opportunities and could afford the things that were necessary for education, healthcare.
He believed in people and in our better angels. And he considered it a high calling all the way to the end. Where are the Lloyd Bentsens now? We need one, or many. Now, a message from the Bentsen family. Here's Lloyd Bentsen III.
Lloyd Bentsen's track record laid out a blueprint to build a better economy for all Americans. Key elements included strong savings, low interest rates, fair trade, fair taxes, and balanced budgets. And most important, leadership. This blueprint's like a pre-flight checklist from the squadron commander taking off on a vital mission. Executing this course back in the 90s required putting country before party. George H.W. Bush's vote for the 91 Deficit Reduction Act, after promising no new taxes, cost him his second term in 1992. Bill Clinton's vote for the 93 Deficit Reduction Act, after promising a middle-class tax cut, and in large part led to the loss of his party's control of the House and the Senate in the 94 elections. But this is what those sacrifices for the country's greater good brought about in the 8 years of the Clinton administration. The longest economic expansion in Americans' history, more than 22 million new jobs. Highest level of home ownership in American history, Lowest unemployment in 30 years. Higher income at all levels, lowest poverty in 20 years. Budget surpluses on track to pay off the entire federal debt by 2009. 40% more families owning stock. And the stock market tripled. All of this was not fortuitous timing. There was a rigorous path forward. Bentsen's Blueprint critically requires disciplined leadership, attracting the best staff, doing the proper research, establishing credibility, respect, and trust with his peers, seeking a consensus with bipartisan approaches to major issues, by seeking common ground without demanding common values. We need to get back on course. $30 trillion of federal debt is a serious threat to our economy and our collective well-being. Can you take these lessons to heart and demand them from your representative? Might you become one of the next generation that demands that we work together for the greater good, embracing the Bentsen Blueprint?
This podcast is produced by Reasonable Volume with guidance from the Bentsen family. It's executive produced by Elise Hugh and Rachel Swaby, and written by Elise Hugh. Percia Verlin is our production coordinator. The show is engineered by Mark Bush and hosted by me. I'm Patrick Frank. You've been listening to The Bentsen Blueprint.